Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 2023 meeting of Triangle Association of Freelancers. April is National Poetry Month, so to help us celebrate, we've got two very special guests, poets Chyrel Jackson and Carla Cherry. They will be in conversation with Lisa Tomey-Zonneveld. So Lisa, take it away.
Thank you, Dawn, so much. Yes, it's not only National Poetry Month, but it's also Black Women's History Month. So how appropriate that we have our special guest here tonight. I've had the pleasure of knowing both Carla and Chyrel. I think we I met both of them doing podcasting. I started to do podcasts, and I think Chyrel and maybe Carla was one of my first guests, but Chyrel and her sister Loris were right there as well. And I've interviewed them a couple times. So it's been a pleasure. In fact, we just finished publishing the talk, which I have mentioned in TAF, and we just had a launch for that. And this book is so wonderful, and it needs to be in the hands of every white person in America, and then pass it on to every other white person in America. Everyone needs to read about the true Black experience of what it's really like to live in a Black skin told by Black people. So definitely, this is a book to have. And that was done with Gardner Neural Publishing, and I'm proud to be a part of the publishing team to help get that book off the ground. And Chyrel and Carla are both in the book, as well as Loris. And I'm going to get emotional because I really feel strongly about this book and the message that's behind it. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm really strong in my philosophy about white supremacy and how it is really dominating. And I'm really scared, to be honest with you. I'm really scared about the state of the world we're in. Nice for me to start out with a really upbeat talk here, because everything's about poetry as being flowers and love and all of that. And it's about that too. It's about all kinds of expression, but it's also about, taking a stand and putting your heart out there, and it's going to come out in all kinds of ways. But enough about that. I want to introduce our guest. Carla Cherry is poetry has appeared in Random Sample Review, Anti-Heroin Chick, 433, Raising Mothers, A Best of the Net, and Pushcart Prize nominee. Her 5 books of poetry are available via iPublishing. She holds an MFA in creative writing from the City College of New York. And to add to her book selections, Carla recently published Clap Your Hands, Stomp Your Feet, a chapbook. Chyrel J. Jackson is a literary visionary reared in the South suburbs outside Chicago. And African-American literature influenced her writing is one of her favorite genres. Jackson writes in the spirit of her past great literary ancestors. 2021 garnered her first literary nomination, Pushcart nominee, for the poem Love Unspoken, published in the Heartbeats anthology. Along with her sister, Loris D. Wallace, who is here tonight as well, they published Mirrored Images and Different Sides of the Same Coin. This edgy writing duo appears in over 8 published poetry anthologies. You'll find them always writing, creating written legacies one book at a time. Jackson is one writer who has found her poetic voice. Welcome, Carla, welcome, Chyrel, welcome, Loris. And I want all 3 of you to feel free to jump in. I'm going to start out with some questions. And I have given these questions to our guest ahead of time, so they have some time to ponder about them. But first, I want to just say welcome. Welcome to our group. Really glad to have you here. It's a bunch of crazy freelancers, and we like to have a lot of fun. It's a very laid-back group. And feel free just to be yourself, because this is the group you can let your hair down in for sure. My first question is, as a Black woman and poet, would you please share about your Black experience that has influenced your poetry? And either one of you can start, or would you like me to pick one of you?
I can begin.
Okay, thanks, Carla.
Sure. Okay, so the first poems that I actually remember reading were written by African Americans. one of the first poetry books that I ever received was Aloneness by Gwendolyn Brooks. And I think I was about 4 years old when my father bought me that one. Another favorite was Honey, I Love by Eloise Greenfield. I also loved Nikki Giovanni's Ego Tripping. That was a book that helped me to write poems of my own. And so I've always been immersed in the African American literary experience. And so, of course, that has influenced my poetry. Another way that being Black has influenced my poetry is I've always seen it as a vehicle to express outrage over oppression and injustice. And racism has been one of the topics of my poems. But more commonly, I write poems that celebrate African American history and culture.
Thank you, Carla. When you said that, it made me think about something. Do you ever find that you get tired of having to address racism?
Oh, of course, every day. I wish racism would just disappear, but unfortunately, it's going to take a very long time. But I'm encouraged by the number of people who are trying to dismantle white supremacy, and so that continues to give me hope. And even though I'm sick of racism, I also try to make sure that I write about other things because, you know, I am a Black woman, but there is so much that I have found in my life to celebrate. So I try to focus on that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Chyrel.
It's almost like the polar opposite of that. And I'm going to talk really fast because I have the best sister and she is going to like probably hit points that I'm sure I'm going to miss. But we kind of had a different experience because we grew up in a suburb outside of Chicago. And we were like, at that time, among the first Blacks to actually move in that area. So you guys can almost imagine what that experience must have been like, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so it's kind of like the reverse because we're always made to read F. Scott Fitzgerald and Emily Bronte, and we're made to, Jonathan Steinbeck. We're always made to kind of read those people. So we grew up reading those people, Judy Blume, and Judy Blume wasn't talking to girls that looked like me, quite frankly. But when we went to college for the first time, as young adult women, we were able to broaden our libraries, and we were given books with African-American writers like James Baldwin, Nikki Giovanni, Sonia Sanchez, and our worlds opened up because for the first time, Terry McMillan was writing stories about young Black women that looked like my sister and I. So we ran and we migrated to those books, but we loved James Baldwin and we loved Langston Hughes because we were studying their writings through the college years, and a light bulb went off. So everything that we didn't have as little girls in the suburbs, now as young women growing up in college, it was a church revival because we were able to just kind of read as much of that stuff as we wanted without limitation. And suburbs doesn't cater to that when you are a little girl, but when you're coming of age and you're in college for the first time, you can kind of read whatever you want in large, huge volumes. And we did that. And that is what influenced us as writers.
Thank you, Chyrel. Loris, would you like to add something?
The only thing I would like to add is my sister is exactly right. We were, forced to read other literature. Edgar Allan Poe, and my brother loved Edgar Allan Poe, and he used to read us Edgar Allan Poe as bedtime stories. And so, but when I was in school, I couldn't really appreciate it because I was like, you know, who talks like this and who, you know, this it was just so foreign to me. I couldn't really relate. But then once I got to college and I started reading Zora Neale Hurston and
Toni Morrison.
Wallace Thurman and Toni Morrison and, you know, all those books. And I was like, oh my God. And then it just kind of opened up for me, and it brought it full circle, because then I could go back and really appreciate Jane Austen. And I'm the biggest Jane Austen fan there is, I think. I love just about everything she writes. I read her stuff once a year, every year, because I love it so much. My favorite story from her is Mansfield Park. And I always think, you know, when you read something that you really like a lot, you're always like, oh, how can I make it better? And I just, you know, once I was able to see myself in literature, I was able to appreciate all the other things that I grew up on. So, you know, all of that influences my writing.
Who would you say would be your strongest influence in your writing of poetry? This is for any of you.
James
Okay.
Baldwin. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
James Baldwin. That's my sister, both my sister and I, we just fell in love with James Baldwin at different times in our lives, you know, but, and it's so funny because we were kind of just talking about this, and it was so funny. We were on the phone with my son, and he was like, Mama, you know, I just love James Baldwin. And me and my sister Chyrel, because she was on the phone with us, we just got the biggest smile on our faces, like, oh my God, here we go again. Because we just, I remember when my sister was in at DePaul University, and she had just met him, and she just, you know, was telling, oh my God, Laura, it's James Baldwin. I mean, she just came home, she was so excited, and she was, you know, just all up in the air and everything. And I was like, yeah, okay, you know, because for me, it was Nikki Giovanni. When I heard Ego Tripping, my whole life, and I am serious, it's like I started living when I heard that poem. And it really was. It was just like a religious experience, I'm telling you. And then, so I kind of got into James Baldwin in my 20s. And when I really sat down and read James Baldwin and really researched him, I mean, what can I say? I'm just in awe. So he is the biggest influence beside Nikki Giovanni, because I love her. Sure.
Sonia Sanchez, Nikki Giovanni, of course, and Langston Hughes would be my my top, and Paul Laurence Dunbar would be my top 4.
Thank you. Carla?
So yes, I was also going to say that Sonia Sanchez has been incredibly influential for me. I love what she does with her word choice. I love her imagery. It's so beautiful. 2 of her poems that are my favorites are This Is Not a Small Voice and Catch a Fire. I just love what she does with poetry.
Thank you. So speaking of poetry, it would not be normal for us to come together for a poetry discussion without hearing some poetry. And I did ask if you all would like to read for us tonight. So who would like to go first?
Chyrel, you could go first if you like.
Laura, you go.
Oh my God. Okay. I'm reading this poem only for the simple fact that when I woke up this morning, I heard some news that kind of put me back on my back. And so I'm going to read this poem. It's called No Justice for Brianna. 1 life, 2 lives, 3 lives, 4. there is no justice for Brianna anymore. We said her name to bring her fame, but injustice has left us a stain. 194 days we waited for the murderous cops to be only exonerated. Blue lives matter while Black bodies drop, bending the laws to protect racist cops. Murderous cops who shoot us while we sleep in our beds, put knees on our necks and bullets in our backs, then say the videos don't show the facts. They say they're here to protect and serve, but that kind of protection we don't want or deserve. We march and we chant, no justice, no peace, as they lie and hide their racist deceit. Our numbers increase as we attend funeral after funeral, while the man appoints coon attorney generals, covered in blackface, disgracing their race, shuffling to the GOP, whose ideology they embrace, hating themselves and their people, while promoting and enforcing the system of evil. 1 life, 2 life, 3 lives, 4. There is no justice for us anymore.
Wow. I think that was a Pushcart Prize nomination.
Yes, it was.
Very strong, very powerful poem.
Thank you.
Chyrel, you got something cooked up there?
I did, and as I was clapping for my sister, I lost the page. So
Oh,
let me.
hey, you'll find it.
Yeah.
While you're looking
Okay.
for that, I'll pull up Carla's website page to show you that. There's some of her different books that she has out. And if you're ready, Chyrel, you can go ahead and I'll be looking for your page while you do that.
Okay, this is Woman for International African American Women's Month. And it's called Woman, and it's in our first book, which is Different Sides of the Same Coin. I am more than the sum of my body parts. I am divine, transcending all space and time. My beginnings are ever of old, eclipsing the African Nile. I acquired knowledge of life's intricate path at King Solomon's feet. I am divine, transcending all space and time. From the hypnotic and mesmerizing sway of my hips, even throughout the ages, men throughout the ages were brought to their knees. All nations came from the bowels of my mother Eve. She was taken right from my father Adam's side. They are supreme, giving life and form to every living, God-breathing thing. You marvel at my ancestry while coveting my majesty, hating what you can't understand. God made black, don't crack. Hair that defies gravity, and melanin that has never regarded science, admittedly quite hard to comprehend. I am more than the sum of my parts. I am divine, transcending all space and time. My father first called me woman.
Thank you. I'm going to share.
I love that.
This is Sisters Rock and Rhyme website. Okay, and Carla.
Okay, so I'm going to write, I'm sorry. I'm going to read a poem that I wrote for my niece, and it's called Anike. As she models her brand new, brand name dress in the mirror, I watch. She gives her chocolate brown kinky twist a toss so her hair can fly. She spins to feel the wisp of cool air against her butterscotch skin. She smiles and calls herself the cutest girl in the world. Shielding my eyes from her sparkling aura, I shake my head and my index finger. Stop that, I say, thinking modesty is noble. But then again, as I look at my life, I'm glad my niece believes. Maybe she won't end up with her self-esteem all black and blue.
Oh,
Oh,
So that was
beautiful.
from my first book, Gnat Feathers and Butterfly Wings.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank
Beautiful
you.
indeed. Thank you. I'm going to open this up now for people in the group if they have any particular questions or comments they'd like to make. Don has his hand up.
I'd like to ask our three guests why poetry is your chosen medium of expression. What is it about poetry that really speaks to you more than say prose? Chyrel, Chyrel, start with you.
Yes, poetry for me was just always because of the language. And particularly, we love Black dialect, and we can get away with it more so of writing it in our poetry. And Lisa surprises me every time because I was talking to my sister. My sister is she's just bold about everything. And I wished I were more like her in that regard because she just celebrates culture and language and she celebrates all of that stuff. And Nikki Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez, both Langston Hughes as well, would encompass it within their writing. And because we studied them and learned about just everything that they did, we kind of wanted to be able to do that. But my sister makes me brave. I actually put a poem up today. I kind of shared it to social media. I wasn't really going to share it to some of the other poetry groups that Lisa and I are part of collectively, because I kind of wasn't sure about it, because it did kind of have that Mark Twain dialect going on in it. But it's really one of my sisters. That's something that she's very strong in, and I just love her because she's another person that's influenced me so much, and I just admire her and love her writing so much. But I shared that for National Poetry Month, and when I looked around, Lisa had shared that poem, but I was feeling like no one's going to want to read that because I felt like it was a little bit more of like in the vernacular, so I didn't really want to share it because it was written in Black dialect. But Lisa shared it first, and then I was just like, well, that's kind of cool. That was kind of great because she kind of just she let me know it was okay. And so I just thought that was really cool. Now, my sister is the complete polar opposite because she would have shared that everywhere and been like, if you guys don't get on board, that's your problem because I love this piece. But I'm a little bit more timid than she is.
Loris, what brings you to poetry?
What brought me to poetry was actually by accident. When I was younger, in my 30s, I was going through some things in my life, and I was trying to understand why these things were happening to me. So I felt like if I started a journal, I could, understand myself and see why these things were happening. So I began writing in my journal, and when I went back to read the first couple of entries in the journal, they kind of read like poems. They had a rhythm, and I was like, wow, I like that. So I kept doing it, and that's how I got into poetry. That's how I started writing poetry. But I was into poetry from college, but I started writing poetry because by accident.
I see. And Carla, how about you?
I've always loved literature. my first love in terms of reading was always novels, actually. But there's something about the musicality of poetry that always appealed to me. And I just decided that I loved writing in that form. I feel a type of freedom to express myself that I might not feel the same way about as a novel, because you have to do a lot more, I guess, introspection and character development. But with poetry, you can, do what you want to do with it.
Mhm.
Plus,
Thank
you
you.
can say things without actually saying, literally saying them. The use of metaphor and poetry is also very appealing, because you can say, you can express something without coming out and just saying it, and just the use of words and how they play on one another. You can't do that in any other form but poetry.
You learn the economy of words, the power of each word. I think when you do poetry, and that's one of the things that went off when I'm doing edits of poetry, I said, go back over and see what's really valuable real estate and what you can just sit on the side of the road. And, then they can go back and read through it. And it's similar to how journalists do, because you don't put a lot of, words into your journalism. You try to be more concise and straightforward. But poetry adds a different twist to it.
I was intrigued by Loris's comment about the power of metaphor, because recently I had the opportunity to interview Rod Serling's daughter, and she was talking about his work on the Twilight Zone and his effort to create an episode that was kind of a telling of the Emmett Till tragedy.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, he realized that he can say things in the form of science fiction, in the metaphor of science fiction, more than he could just basically laying it out on the page. You kind of had to trick the viewer into what your message is. And so, that to me was also the power of the metaphor, how getting around the restrictions to tell the story that needs to be told.
Yes, yes, I agree with that.
Does anyone else have any questions? Do any of you aspire to write prose? Do any of you have a novel or a short story that you're eager to write, or is poetry really your wheelhouse and your main form of expression?
Well, we actually were in the middle of really writing our first, I guess you could say, nonfiction or fictional story, but it was loosely based on our upbringing of being in the suburbs as young Black girls growing up. But it was so heavy, it became so heavy for us that we kind of had to just put it off to the side and bump it out of the way. And we went right back to what we love, what we know, which is our third book. And that's like our comfort. It was like feeling like you just returned home.
Right.
So we are working on it, but it doesn't come as natural. And quite honestly, we don't enjoy that as much as we do the poetry.
Carla, how about you?
Well, I've had one short story published. I would like to experiment with other genres, maybe write some more short stories. I would like to do some creative nonfiction at some point. I want to do some more research about my family and maybe turn that into something, but I'm not sure what form it'll take. But right now, poetry, that's my first love.
That's great. Loris, how about yourself?
Well, actually, when I was in college, I fancied myself to be the new Spike Lee. So I've written a lot of screenplays that I never finished, because when you're writing, you think, "Oh my God, this is the best thing I ever wrote," and then you go back and you read it and like, "Oh, this is trash." And the only time I haven't done that is when I write poetry. I go back and I'm like, "Oh, okay, I still like it." So then, that's how I know that it's good enough to be published. But so far, all of my screenplays have not, I just go back and I read them. I'm like, this is trash. So I never finish it. But I did fancy myself to, be a screen writer, And I keep writing like these little treatments, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is pretty good. But when I started getting into character development and storyline, that's when I fall apart. I'm like, oh, this is getting bad.
Yeah. I was curious, for the three of you, if when you sit down, when inspiration for a poem strikes and you sit down to create, does the work usually come out pretty close to the way you want it, or do you find yourselves having to revise a lot? And Chyrel, let me start with you if I could.
Don, I'm really good about sitting down and saying, I'm going to write 100 pages and write them. And I don't have to think about anything, because if, I pretty much have the topic of what I want to deal with, and then I write. My sister is the polar opposite of that. She can only write by means of inspiration. And that was one of our biggest bones of contention between us. And we were arguing across 2 books. But now, because I understand her, she is just not, I don't want to say she's not disciplined in that way, but she is not organic and just making up her mind. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write. Something has to inspire her. She says it's a click. She calls it, she needs a click.
A click.
To kind of get her juices going, and then she will start to write. But Laura, why don't you tell Don about that?
Okay, for me, like my sister was saying, I have to have a click. Something has to inspire me. But normally, if I can come up with that first sentence, then the poem builds and it builds, and then basically that's it. I don't do a lot of editing, because I don't want to change it. I don't want it to become something that it wasn't meant to be. I don't overthink it, because then you start taking away from what you were trying to get, the original meaning of the poem. So if I can come up with that first line, then I know that it's going to be on. But the worst thing for me is if I'm pulling it out, just painstakingly trying to figure out this point. When it gets like that, I have to walk away, because if I'm pulling it out, it's not authentic. It has to flow. If it doesn't flow for me right off the bat, and I normally, if it does not flow right off the bat, and I'm pulling it out and I go back and read it, it's trash, and I will not put it in the book. But most of the poems that have been published, and even the book that we're writing now, they come like that. And then when I go back and read it and it's still good, I'm like, okay, that's good enough to be published.
Carla, for yourself, when you write a poem, does it come out usually pretty close to the way you like it, or do you do a lot of revision?
It depends. I have poems that I've written within 15 minutes, but those are usually not the poems that I submit for publication. If I want to send a poem out, I will spend a lot of time revising it. Sometimes I'm able to get something out on paper and I can just leave it and not touch it again. But for the most part, I just need to get the idea down, and then I'll have to leave it alone for a while, let it marinate, give myself more time to think about it, and then I'll come back to it and I'll enhance the imagery. I'll really look at the word choice and make sure that every word counts. I'll look at my lines. Will the lines work better if they're longer, if they're shorter? And just really make sure that the poem is doing its work. And then after that, I'll send it out for publication and see, if other people agree that it's worthy of being seen.
That's terrific. Does anyone else have any questions for our guest this evening? Sarah?
I've submitted poems to journals, and they'll say, oh, we don't take rhyming poetry, or, some of my poetry is formatted like sonnets and it doesn't really flow with the rest of their publication. What is your advice about just being yourself and what writes it, and you write what matters to you versus trying to conform to trends or what's getting sold, what's getting published? Like, where's your balancing act between those two?
Carla, can we start with you?
Sure. Well, there are so many different lit journals out there, and I have seen in the submission section, they'll say that they don't really take rhyming poetry, but there are others that do. So I would really, do you have an account with Submittable?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do you have an account with Submittable?
No, I don't.
Okay, go to Submittable's website and you'll see that they have a list of calls for submissions. And you look at the different lit journals that are calling for work and see what they're looking for. There are publications out there that take formal verse, that really celebrate rhyming poetry. And then there are others that are more focused on finding experimental forms. So you just have to keep pushing and keep sending your work out there. I've had poems that have been rejected about 10 different times, but there was a publisher that accepted it and then it got published. So you keep believing in your work, keep working on your poetry, getting it to be as tight as you can get it to be, and just keep sending it out there.
Carla, does Submittable offer the same service for nonfiction writing, for journalism? Or do magazines put pitches out through Submittable? Do you know?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, but I think they don't just cover poetry. I think there are other genres as well. So yeah, I would definitely go to Submittable and just check it out and see what kind of work is being sought out.
I sure will. Chyrel, do you have a answer for Sarah's question?
The same thing, Sarah. You have to believe in yourself. Everybody has an opinion about something, but writing is much like art is. It's very subjective. It depends on the taste. If it's something you love, then you go with it until you find someone that is going to go along with you and give you a yes. You keep going. You might get 100 no's, but keep going with it.
Thank you.
Loris, how about yourself? Any thoughts?
Yes. My thought is always be your authentic self. Don't conform, because when you conform, it's not true to who you are. I think everybody's writing should define who they are. And if you're true and you believe in yourself and you're authentic to your true being, they will come. They will come. You don't have to cross any lines and you don't have to conform to any guidelines. Be yourself.
Okay.
Be true
Awesome.
to yourself.
Thank you. Any additional questions from anybody? Nobody? Ladies, I want to thank you on behalf of myself and the organization, and Lisa also, for joining us this evening. This was absolutely wonderful. Just wonderful. We really appreciate all of it, the poems you read for us. Congrats on your publications and the books that you have. Thank you so much for being with us. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
If you'd like to hang with us
you.
a few minutes, we're just going to talk about writing a little bit further. If you have to go, I understand, but we have just a few more minutes within our meeting. If you want to hang with us and have anything to share, we'd certainly like to have you do that. This is a part of our meeting where we basically share our good news. People who've had sales, whatever it might be. And so I'll start. What did I have? I've had some articles recently published, my new stuff published on the website for Encyclopedia Britannica, which I'm very excited about. And I have an article in the May-June issue of Writer's Digest about the items found in lost books collection at the Oakland, California Public Library. And I had so much fun researching and writing that article. So I hope those of you who get Writer's Digest will check it out. Does anyone else have any good news to share? Anybody? Lisa?
I see Sarah Ryan sitting out there and I see her name sticking up on my little file here. I'm working on this folder. So all the different submissions that we got from around the world for this project I'm working on. It's coming out in June called Dear Heart. And it's letters and pictures and different dedications to people. And all of it's done by hand. Been working on this project, putting it together. So I'm really excited about that. I also wanted to say, when Sarah brought that, and when you asked about the people that accepting work, finelines.org is accepting submissions, and we do accept rhyming poetry. I'm one of their editors. We do accept rhyming poetry. So we accept everything, short stories, poetry, photographs, artwork, because we like a varied journal. So
that's
there you
what,
go.
Lisa, have you promoted the journal to a serious extent on the website through TAF?
I have from time to time mentioned it.
In addition to Sarah's contribution, have many of our members submitted anything? I'm just curious.
Yeah, Han's a pretty regular submitter. Let's see, Chyrel, aren't you in there? I think you've been in there. Carla, I know you taught at our conference a couple times ago. So yeah.
That's wonderful. That's great. Anyone else? Anything to share? Oh, Terry?
I can say I interviewed for my dream job and it would be a writing job. So I don't want to jinx it, but
Fingers crossed.
I hope to have good news in a month or so.
Keep us posted. That'd be great. Nancy, what do you have to share?
I wrote the end of a short story that I hope will be in the TAF Omnibus too. Because you told me last time, just write a story, Nancy. It's not that easy. I write big stories, and you're making me write 2,800 words or less. So, but
Yeah.
I was at a Scottish Highland Games a week and a half ago. And while I'm in between action, I sat there with my notebook and I wrote out a plot. So I hope you like A Kilted Kiss.
Can't wait to read it.
And my next book comes out May 12th. It's Regency historical set mostly in Scotland. And it's called A Rogue's Ring.
I'm sorry, the title again?
A Rogue's Ring. It's a treasure hunt.
This is book number what for you?
3 of that one. I don't know. I'm up in like 40.
Nancy's wrote a few books over the course of her career. I thought I saw
Sarah, I didn't start until my son was in junior high. I'm a
Wow.
late bloomer.
Man.
So go for it. Yeah, 3-year-old, do it. You can do it.
I thought I saw an additional hand. I don't want to, Sarah?
Yeah, I just finished the first draft of my nonfiction book proposal.
Oh, great.
So I'm sending it to someone first to look at it, and then I'm going to send it to other people as I get it better and better.
Are you working with Lisa Hagen on this, or is this
Yes.
another project? Yeah.
Oh, yes. This is the one I'm working with Lisa Hagen on. I definitely would like to send it to you, Dawn, and also Elaine Klinicki. But I'm sending it to a friend of mine first just to get some initial feedback. So maybe it can be as good as possible before it comes down to you guys.
I'd be happy to take a look when it's ready. Absolutely. Send it on when you're all set. I know
Right.
Elaine would be happy to take a look also.
Thanks.
Hannah?
I put a link in the chat for a soft cover anthology that's coming out from the short of it. And I have quite a few poems in there. So happy about
Wonderful.
that.
Congrats. That's terrific.
Thank you.
I'm in there too. I'm sure gonna
Oh,
be book
yeah.
buddies.
Nice. Another thing that TAF owns. I like that.
Yeah.
And I want to take this opportunity to introduce Ron Whitaker. Ron is our latest or most recent member. He reached out to me a few days ago, expressing a very strong interest in being a professional in this industry. I told him he'd come to the right place, and to make full use of our listserv, ask all the questions that he has on writing, publishing, any aspect. I know that there's someone in TAF who will be able to help him on every question that he has. So I just wanted to say, welcome, Ron. It's great to have you with us. I hope we will hear from you a lot, and looking forward to helping you any way that we possibly can.
Well, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. I'm the same excitement that you got when our initial phone call. I've been super excited ever since, and I told you it's excited motivation / desperation to move on to a new career from and get off the 2-job hamster wheel.
I understand completely. So like I said, take advantage of what we have. Don't hesitate to reach out with questions. We understand that you are at the very beginning of your journey, and we're more than happy to help you take those first steps.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate
Great
it.
to have
Thank
you
you,
with
guys. Thank you.
So anything else before we conclude? Any other questions for our guests or any good news to share? Any questions anybody might have? Okay, this has been oh, I'm sorry, Sarah?
If anybody else wants to read my nonfiction book proposal and review it, I definitely appreciate it. So if anybody else, it's about mental illness and surviving it, serious mental illness that's stigmatized. So if anybody else is interested in reviewing it, you're more than welcome to. I'd love to have you on. So
Absolutely. Terrific. All
Carla
right.
just did something with NAMI, didn't you?
Yeah.
A poetry thing.
yeah, well, I've been doing a number of blog posts with NAMI.
Yeah.
But I find that the poetry that I published in the first TAF Omnibus, and then in Dear Heart, definitely is about mental illness and surviving.
I want to encourage everyone to go out and purchase the books written by our guests this evening. It sounds like absolutely wonderful across the board. And again, thank you so much, Chyrel, Loris, and Carla for joining us tonight. This was great. We really appreciate everything.
Thank
It
you
was
so much. It was a
wonderful.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Everyone have a great night.
Hope to see
You
all of
too.
you again. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck to you, Sarah.
Oh, thank you.